Doctors spend more than 10 years of their lives learning how to save people. 10 years of anatomy, emergency rooms, night shifts, and decisions where being 1 second late can change an entire life. And then, they still get complaints about shoes that don't match the vibe, a beard that looks unprofessional, weak Wi-Fi, and the font size on the discharge papers hurting someone's eyes. Because when people walk into a hospital, they don't just bring their illness. They bring fear, expectations, ego, and the mindset of a customer waiting for a perfect service experience. This is not a story about medicine. This is a story about people when they lose control, and their first instinct is to complain. Here are 31 real complaints. Each one proves something very human. Someone is trying to save your life, and someone else is absolutely furious because Netflix won't load. Story 1. Complaining about a doctor wearing bright orange Crocs. This was a serious heart surgery. The operating room was tense machines humming steadily, everyone completely focused. One small mistake and everything could go very wrong. But in that life or death moment, the patient didn't ask about the risks, didn't ask about survival rates, didn't ask how long the surgery would take. The thing they were most concerned about was the doctor's bright orange Crocs. Not light orange, bright orange. So bright they almost stole the spotlight in a room, literally saving a life. In the patient's mind, the thought wasn't, "Am I going to make it?" It was, "Why is the person operating on my heart wearing shoes that look like a midnight grocery run?" This is a very human reflex. When you can't control what's happening to your heart, you try to control the smallest thing left. And if you can't decide between life and death, then at least that orange color is absolutely not okay. Story 2. Thinking a cast means the pain should stop immediately. The patient had a broken bone. Real pain. The kind of pain where even breathing too deeply feels like a personal mistake. The doctor carefully applied the cast, aligned everything, stabilized. It followed every medical step. Everything was proper, professional, and very much not a miracle. And 5 minutes later, the patient asked with genuine hope, "Why does it still hurt?" In their mind, a cast works like a mute button. Flip it on and the pain disappears. Like painkillers, but the plaster edition. They didn't see the cast as something that holds the bone still so it can heal. They saw it as a promise, an unspoken guarantee that says once it's wrapped, the pain is gone. This is a very common misunderstanding. When pain lasts too long, people start believing in magical mechanisms. But the uncomfortable truth is a cast doesn't take the pain away. It just makes sure your bone hurts in the right place and doesn't hurt even more because you moved the wrong way. Story 3. Complaining because the remote has no Netflix button. The patient was admitted for medical monitoring. Heart rate monitors attached everywhere, nurses coming in and out constantly. The atmosphere was very hospital, but the patient was mentally checked into a hotel. They grabbed the remote, clicked through the buttons, then frowned in annoyance. Not because of pain, not because of anxiety, but because there was no Netflix button. In their mind, a hospital and a hotel are basically the same thing minus the robe. Everything else should be equal. There's a bed, there's a TV, so obviously on-demand entertainment should be included. They didn't see this as a place for life-saving care and medical monitoring. They saw it as an inconvenient vacation, one that still needs to be comfortable. This is a very familiar mindset. I'm a customer, I'm paying for this, I deserve good service. And so while someone is checking their blood pressure, someone else is getting irritated because they can't continue the episode they were watching last night. Story 4. Self-diagnosing a rare disease online. The patient came in looking very serious. Not the "I feel tired" kind of serious. The "I've done my research" kind. They went online, read 7 articles, watched 3 videos, and diagnosed themselves with a disease so rare the doctor had only seen it twice in their entire career. They explained their symptoms with full confidence like they were defending a PhD thesis. The doctor listened, did a thorough exam, reviewed the results, then said calmly, "You have bronchitis." And just like that, the patient got upset. Not because it was serious, not because it was dangerous, but because it was too normal. Bronchitis, it didn't sound dramatic enough, not rare enough, not interesting enough to tell their friends. In the patient's mind was a very human disappointment I was ready for a rare disease. But the doctor handed them a truth that was hard to accept. You're not special. You're just coughing. Story 5. Refusing a doctor because he has a beard. The patient looked the doctor up and down, didn't read the name badge, didn't ask about credentials, didn't care about years of experience. Their eyes stopped at the beard. Not a dirty beard, not a messy one, but a neat, well-groomed beard, the kind that says, I know what I'm doing. But in the patient's mind, a beard meant unclean. Beard equals bacteria. Beard equals untrustworthy. Science less important than vibes. They asked for a different doctor. Not because of a medical mistake, but because he didn't look clean. The irony is the doctor being rejected had washed his hands longer than most people work out, wore a mask, wore gloves, followed more sterilization protocols than anyone could count. But none of that mattered against a very familiar bias. Appearance feels more reassuring than expertise you can't actually see. Story 6. Using an asthma inhaler, like air freshener. The patient complained that the inhaler doesn't work at all. They said it with full confidence, the kind of confidence that comes from trying twice. The doctor asked how they were using it. The patient demonstrated, immediately held the inhaler up, sprayed once into the air, then inhaled gently like they were testing a perfume. No deep breath, no seal around the mouth, no holding the air in, just spray and hope. In their mind, medicine works like room spray. Once you spray it, the air automatically becomes better. When nothing improved, the conclusion came fast and clean. This medication doesn't work. No one considered the possibility that it had been used wrong from the start. This is a very common misunderstanding. When you don't understand the mechanism, you blame the outcome. And so instead of asking how to use it properly, people choose the more familiar option. Blame the medicine, blame the doctor, and feel absolutely certain the problem is everyone else, except themselves. Story 7. Eating healthy before surgery and thinking it doesn't count. The doctor gave very clear instructions. Do not eat anything before surgery. Very clear, very simple, no fine print, no hidden exceptions. But the patient had their own interpretation. They didn't eat food. They just had a kale smoothie and a slice of avocado toast. Healthy, green, fresh, basically vegetable water. In their mind, medical rules come with an unspoken exception. Food that doesn't taste good doesn't count as food. Food that's healthy gets a free pass. When the doctor found out, the reaction was disbelief. Why did you eat before surgery? The patient answered sincerely, I didn't eat junk. It was all healthy. This is where science meets personal belief. Your stomach doesn't know what healthy means. Anesthesia doesn't care if you eat clean or cheat. Your body only knows one very simple fact. If there's food in your stomach, there's risk. And just like that, the kale smoothie was officially grouped as dangerous right alongside burgers and fries, at least on surgery day. Story 8. Thinking blood pressure reflects a chill personality. The blood pressure machine let out a very unchill beep. The numbers appeared clear, direct, and absolutely not relaxed. The doctor looked at the reading. The patient looked at the doctor, then shook their head with confidence. That can't be right. I'm a very chill person. In their mind, blood pressure isn't a biological measurement. It's a personality test. High blood pressure doesn't match their self-image. They meditate. They listen to slow podcasts. They say everything will be fine on a regular basis. So how dare that number be high? They didn't argue with data. They argued with personal belief. The logic went something like, I'm chill, so my body has to be chill too. But biology doesn't care how likable you are. Blood vessels don't read self-help books. Blood pressure doesn't know you hate drama. The body does only one thing. It reflects what's happening on the inside, no matter how zen the image on the outside might be. Story 9. Avoiding salt while eating only processed foods. The patient proudly said they had completely cut out salt. No sprinkling salt, no dipping sauce, not a single grain added at the table. Then they described their daily diet: sausages, instant noodles, deli meats, canned food snacks, and bottled sauces. Very convenient, very modern, and very salty. In their mind, salt only exists as white crystals in a shaker. If they can't see it, it doesn't count. They thought they were cleverly following the rules. No salt equals healthy eating. Perfect logic. Wrong science. Sodium doesn't care whether you hold a salt shaker or not. It hides inside everything labeled processed, quietly, consistently, and very effectively. When the doctor explained, the reaction was confusion. Wait, these count too. Yes, they do. Salt doesn't disappear just because you can't see it. It just moves and comes back in much larger amounts. Story 10. Understanding take it easy as complete immobility. The doctor said a very familiar phrase, "Go home and take it easy." It sounded friendly, relaxed, like a casual weekend wish, and the patient understood it. Literally. They went home and decided to do absolutely nothing. No walking, no standing up, no stretching. They basically became a piece of furniture. In their mind, take it easy meant lying still until the body magically fixes itself. Movement sounds risky. Might be against instructions. A few days later, they came back with a brand new list of problems. Back pain, stiff joints, dizziness, and the feeling they had aged 10 years overnight. And the conclusion was said with full confidence. But the doctor told me to rest. This is the downside of vague instructions. When there are no concrete examples, people choose the interpretation that's most convenient. Because if doing nothing is allowed, then why do anything at all? Story 11. Using the nurse call button like a concierge. The hospital has a very powerful button, the nurse call button. Technically, it's meant for pain emergencies or situations that actually need medical attention. But in this patient's mind, it was the concierge button of a 5-star hotel. They didn't press it because they couldn't breathe. Not because of severe pain, but because, "Hey, can you change the TV channel for me?" 10 minutes later, the button was pressed again. This time to ask, "Are you free? Can you help me do a crossword?" The bell rings. The nurse rushes in. And every time the door opens, there's hope that it's something important. But it's not. Meanwhile, the nurse is monitoring medications and handling an emergency case in another room. The confusion here is very clear. A hospital is not a hotel, and a nurse is not a personal attendant. But when you're lying in bed all day, and there's a button that makes someone appear instantly, it's very hard to resist that feeling of power. Why press the remote yourself when you can just press the button? Story 12. Complaining because the window view is too interesting. The patient was assigned a room with a large window, natural light, fresh air, a view of the city alive, breathing and functioning normally. And they weren't happy. Not because it was noisy, not because the sunlight was too bright, but because there was too much to look at. Cars passing by, people walking, the cafe across the street full of laughter and conversation. Life happening non-stop without asking anyone for permission. The patient complained that the view was too stimulating, not good for mental peace. Looking at it just makes me feel like I'm missing out on everything. They asked to change rooms. No need for a nice view. No need for a big window. They just wanted a brick wall, a blank wall, silent, no movement. Nothing to remind them the outside world was still going on. This is a very human paradox. When you're forced to stop, you don't want to see anything moving faster than you. Sometimes the most exhausting thing isn't the noise. It's the feeling that life is still having fun without waiting for you to join. Story 13. Complaining about Wi-Fi. Because the network name lacks emotion. The hospital has Wi-Fi, free, stable, does exactly what it's supposed to do. The network name is patient guest, and the patient doesn't like it. Not because the signal is weak, not because it's slow, but because of vibes. It sounds so cold. There's no healing energy. I'm already stressed enough being here. In their mind, Wi-Fi isn't just for internet access. It needs empathy. It needs emotional support. It needs to gently whisper that everything will be okay. They suggested alternative names, healing hotspot, recovery vibes, stay strong _5G. Because if you're stuck in a hospital bed, at the very least, your internet connection should feel comforting. The irony is, the Wi-Fi works perfectly fine despite its emotionally unavailable name. It doesn't comfort anyone. It doesn't send positive energy. It does one thing and one thing only: connect. But for some people, the most upsetting part isn't the illness, it's that the Wi-Fi network refuses to care about their feelings. Because in this era, even an internet signal is expected to have a heart. Story 14. Complaining that the electronic bed is too complicated. The hospital is equipped with modern electronic beds. Buttons to raise the head, buttons to lift the legs, anti-pressure sore modes, a control panel that looks like it belongs on a spaceship, and the patient feels stressed. They stare at the remote with suspicion. Too many buttons, too many icons, too many ways to mess something up. In their mind, one wrong press could launch the bed straight into the ceiling. They sigh and say a very familiar line, "Beds used to be simpler." Back then, if you wanted to raise the head, you cranked it. If you wanted to lower it, you cranked it back. No technology, no instructions. Now it's different. The bed is smart, but the human doesn't want to be smart along with it. Technology is designed to reduce stress, but only if you understand it. If you don't, it turns into a full-blown nerve test. And so instead of enjoying the convenience, the patient just wants to return to the golden age when the bed didn't know anything and didn't expect you to know anything either. Story 15. Critiquing hospital food like a Michelin judge. The patient looked at the hospital meal tray with great seriousness. Not the look of someone who's hungry, but the look of a food critic. They took a sip of the broth, paused, reflected, then shook their head. This broth lacks umami. No joke, not sarcasm. A deep analysis like they were handing out stars to a fine dining restaurant. Dessert was even more intense. The jello was examined under the light. The color tone feels off. Meanwhile, the goal of the meal was very simple, easy to digest, low in salt, and not exhausting for the body. But for this patient, food wasn't just food, it was an experience. They forgot they were in a hospital, not a Michelin restaurant. No chef coming out to explain the dish, no seasonal menu, just a kitchen doing one job, keeping you healthy enough so you won't have to eat hospital food much longer. Story 16. Complaining that the cold stethoscope disrupted their aura. The doctor placed the stethoscope on the patient's chest. Quick, gentle, by the book. And the patient flinched. Not because it hurt, but because of energy. The stethoscope is too cold, they said seriously. It throws off my aura. In that moment, medicine and spirituality officially met. On one side, heart rate, lungs, physiology. On the other, energy fields, chakras, and cosmic alignment. The doctor explained it very scientifically. The stethoscope is made of metal. Metal is cold. That's it. But the patient wasn't reassured. They felt their vibration was off. Their spirit unsettled. The experience was not healing. This was a metaphysical reaction to a very ordinary procedure. When the body is examined, people interpret sensations using the language they know best. And sometimes, instead of worrying about whether the heart and lungs are okay, people worry more about whether their aura needs to be rebalanced after having their heartbeat checked. Story 17. Wanting treatment with celery and crystals. The patient nodded politely while the doctor spoke. Prescribed medication, clear dosage, complete instructions. Then they smiled and said, "I think I'll try the natural route first." The natural route here meant celery juice every morning and a crystal placed next to the bed. They didn't call it refusing medication. They called it listening to their body. In their mind, a 40-minute podcast is more trustworthy than 10 years of medical school. Because podcasts have calming background music, doctors do not. When the doctor warned about the risk, they nodded politely and said thank you, then continued believing that positive energy would take care of the rest. This is the moment when science loses to storytelling. Medication is dry. Podcasts are inspiring. And so instead of taking pills on schedule, the patient puts their faith in celery crystals and a very convincing stranger online who says modern medicine is hiding the truth from you. Story 18. Complaining the needle is too shiny and suspicious. The nurse got ready to give the injection. A new needle, sterile, clean, and shiny. Too shiny. The patient squinted at it under the light. The metal reflected so clearly it somehow killed their trust. And just like that, the suspicion began. Why is it that shiny? In their mind, the shinier the needle, the bigger the conspiracy behind it? Why is it so shiny? Who approved the level of shine? And is the government involved? Suddenly, nobody was talking about the medicine or the dosage anymore. The conversation took a hard turn into surveillance control and truths they don't want you to know. The nurse just stood there trying to finish a perfectly normal shot, but accidentally walked into a conspiracy screenplay. This is when fear needs anything to latch onto. No logic required, just the right reflection at the right angle. And so instead of being afraid of the needle, the patient became afraid of the story their imagination decided to write. Story 19. Wanting to rename Code Blue to Code Sunshine. Hospitals have a very serious term, Code Blue. It means the heart has stopped. An emergency, no room for jokes. But for one patient, the problem wasn't the emergency itself. It was the vibes. Code Blue sounds too negative, they suggested. Not healing. Stressful for people to hear. They proposed a new option, Code Sunshine. Warmer, friendlier. Almost like an outdoor event. In their mind, changing the name means changing the energy. And positive energy will probably make the heart start again. Medicine doesn't work on branding. The heart doesn't care about names, it just needs fast action. But this is the era of rebranding everything. Products, jobs, even crises. And so while doctors are racing against the clock, someone still believes the real issue isn't the emergency. It's whether the emergency sounds pleasant enough. Story 20. Complaining because the doctor uses medical terms. The doctor carefully explained the test results, medical terminology, clear causes, clear next steps, and the patient got uncomfortable. Why does it sound so intense, so many technical words? It doesn't feel friendly. They didn't hate the information. They hated that it sounded like medicine. In their mind, illness should be normalized. Fewer terms, more feelings. Something like your body is a little sad, so it's reacting this way. But medicine isn't a self-help podcast. The body doesn't speak in metaphors, and disease doesn't disappear just because you give it a cuter name. A doctor can slow down, explain more simply, but they can't remove medical terms entirely because that's the only way to be precise. And so caught between wanting reassurance and needing accuracy, the patient really wants just one thing: to hear their illness sound less like an illness. Story 21. Complaining the blood pressure cuff. Judges their arm. The blood pressure cuff wrapped around the patient's arm, tightened, held for a few seconds, then released. Very mechanical, very emotionless. But the patient didn't see it that way. It squeezes in a very judgmental way, they said. Like it's blaming me for eating too much salt. In that moment, a medical device suddenly had an attitude, feelings, and personal opinions. The patient felt judged, not just about their blood pressure, but about their lifestyle habits and the dinners they'd rather not talk about. In reality, the machine does exactly one thing. It squeezes your arm to measure blood pressure. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't remember what you ate. But when the numbers don't look good, people tend to look for someone to blame. And machines are very convenient targets, because it's easier to believe a machine has attitude than to accept that your body is speaking very clearly. Story 22. Complaining that the morning sun is too harsh. The patient complained that the morning sunlight shines straight into the room. Too bright, too harsh, too punctual. The curtains were already closed. The door was already shut. But the sun was still doing its job. They sighed and asked very seriously, is there a way to change the direction of the sunlight? In that moment, the problem was no longer the room. It was the Earth, rotation, orbit. Everything suddenly made the list of things that needed adjustment. A hospital can change rooms, change beds, change doctors. But changing the direction of the sun is a bit above its authority. This is when discomfort crosses the line of logic. When you lose control over your own body, you start wanting to control the entire universe. And if the sun can't rise later, at the very least, someone should be held responsible for a planet that refuses to be more gentle in the morning. Because when you're exhausted, even natural light can start to feel like an attack. Story 23. Complaining because the nurse is too handsome. The patient filed a very awkward complaint. Not about the medication, not about the pain, but about appearance. That nurse is too handsome, they said. It's distracting. In their mind, a hospital should be neutral, not ugly, but also not too attractive. Everything should be normalized. Appearance to them is a distracting factor. Heart rate goes up. Blood pressure rises slightly. Unclear whether it's the illness or the smile. They asked to change nurses. not because of competence, but because of feelings. The irony is the nurse was just doing his job, checking vitals, handing out medication, and accidentally being handsome. This is when the body reacts strongly and the brain tries to find a reasonable explanation. Instead of admitting they're flustered, people choose the safer option, calling it an inappropriate environment. Because in a hospital, everyone wants to be healed even from emotions that were never prescribed. Story 24, complaining because the doctor's handwriting is too nice. The doctor wrote the prescription, clear handwriting, neatly aligned, easy to read at first glance, and the patient got suspicious. That handwriting is too nice, they said. It doesn't look like a doctor's. In the collective imagination, doctor handwriting is supposed to be unreadable, a little messy, almost like a secret code. Something you have to ask the pharmacist about twice just to be sure. Handwriting that's too neat feels unrealistic, not stressful enough. Lacking that this person must be extremely busy energy. They believe the worse the handwriting, the better the doctor. More patience, more night shifts, more experience. Nice handwriting sounds like free time, and free time is suspicious. The irony is that clear handwriting reduces mistakes, prevents medication errors, and makes everything safer. But for this patient, reassurance doesn't come from clarity. It comes from a very familiar belief a good doctor should write in a way that no one can read. Story 25. Not lifting heavy objects, but walking a 120-pound dog. The doctor gave very clear instructions. Do not lift anything heavy. The patient nodded. Very serious, very compliant. Then they added, I don't lift anything at all. I just walk my 120-pound dog every morning. In their mind, there's a very technical distinction. Lifting is lifting. Walking is walking. Two completely different things. They don't pick the dog up. The dog just, pulls them along. Technically speaking, they're innocent. But the body doesn't care about that logic. Muscles don't read definitions. The spine doesn't distinguish between pulling force and lifting force. When the dog suddenly yanks, the force still goes straight to the back, shoulders, and core. Very real, very physical. This is when people use intelligence to loophole medical instructions, not to be dishonest, but to keep doing what they enjoy. And so instead of admitting I messed up, they choose a more comforting line: I didn't lift anything. I just walked the dog. Story 26. Complaining about the surgical scar. The surgery was successful, very successful. Successful in the very literal sense, it saved a life. The heart started working again. Complications were controlled. The doctor smiled in relief, and the patient looked down at the incision, then frowned. Why is there a scar? In their mind, modern surgery works like photo editing. Cut, fix, save. No trace left behind. They see survival as a given, but a scar, unacceptable. The scar is treated like a cosmetic flaw, an unnecessary detail, something that shouldn't exist. They forget the body doesn't have an undo button. No pre-surgery version to go back to, only the version that's still alive. The scar isn't a failure. It's the receipt for continued existence. A very clear sign that someone opened your body, fixed what needed fixing, and closed it in time. But for some people, surviving is expected. The evidence of survival, however, still demands an explanation. Story 27. Wanting a dream menu during anesthesia. The doctor explained anesthesia very clearly. You will sleep deeply. You won't know anything. The patient nodded, then asked, Will I dream, doctor? Not just any dream, a curated one. They were slightly disappointed to learn that anesthesia doesn't come with a menu. No option to choose an ocean dream. No childhood memories package. No setting for gentle, positive dreams. In their mind, anesthesia is like a premium experience. If you're going to sleep, it should at least be worth it. At the very least, something interesting to talk about afterward. When they woke up and remembered nothing, the reaction was pure letdown. Wait. That's it. No light, no journey, no message from the universe. Just sleep, then awake. This is where medicine collides with entertainment expectations. Anesthesia is not a spiritual spa. It doesn't tell stories. It does one very dry thing: keeps you unconscious long enough for someone to fix your body and finish the job. Story 28. Complaining that the bones on the X-ray don't look good. The doctor pointed at the X-ray and said, This is your bone. Clear, accurate, scientific. The patient looked for a moment, then frowned. It doesn't look very nice, not because it was broken, not because it was misaligned, but because of aesthetics. In their mind, even diagnoses should meet visual standards: straighter, more balanced, fewer awkward angles. They compared their x-ray to illustrations they'd seen online: whiter, cleaner, like it had been filtered. But x-rays don't use Instagram. They don't adjust brightness. They don't smooth things out. They don't care whether you like the result. Their job is very simple: to show the truth inside the body. Sometimes rough, sometimes ugly, but very real. And so while the doctor is focused on whether the bone will heal, the patient is busy worrying about something very modern: whether their bones are photogenic enough on film. Story 29, complaining because the bill uses an ugly font. The patient held the hospital bill. Long, very long. Long enough to cause dizziness. The strange part was they didn't complain about the numbers. No heavy breathing. No shock at the total amount. They complained about the font. Times New Roman It felt like a visual insult. Too serious. Not friendly. In their mind, the amount can be high, but the font should be gentle. The bill should use round, warm letters. Something that says, "We're sorry about this amount." Times New Roman made them feel judged, evaluated, reminded that this is serious business. The irony is the font doesn't make the bill cheaper. It doesn't reduce a single number. It doesn't soften the financial pain. But in this world, when reality can't be changed, people choose to complain about the one thing that feels controllable. And for this patient, the problem wasn't the money. The problem was, why did it have to be Times New Roman? Story 30, complaining because the doctor shouted clear during defibrillation. The heart stopped. The room went tense. The doctor prepared to deliver a shock. Clear. The shout was loud, sharp, exactly how medical protocol requires it. The heart started beating again. Everyone exhaled. A life was saved. And then the patient complained. It was too loud, not very friendly. It startled me. In their mind, the issue wasn't survival. It was service attitude. They forgot that clear isn't a greeting, not a motivational slogan. It's a command to make sure no one is touching the patient when electricity passes through the body. But once the danger is over, people switch back to customer mode very quickly. Being saved is expected. How you're saved is what gets rated. This is a very human paradox. When things are dangerous, everything is forgiven. When things are safe again, people start remembering the tone. Because in a service-driven world, even being saved can be criticized for not being gentle enough. Story 31, complaining because the doctor asked, "What do you do for a living?" The appointment went completely normally. The doctor asked about symptoms, medical history, allergies, current medications. Everything was fine. Then the doctor asked one very human question. "What do you do for a living?" Not for diagnosis, not for investigation, just to build rapport. A simple human-to-human moment, and the patient got upset. They frowned, didn't answer, then filed an official complaint for collecting information not medically relevant. The funny part is they were perfectly willing to share every past surgery, every medication they've taken, every allergy, even the last time they used the bathroom. But their job, that was the line, a state secret. In their mind, a doctor should only see a body, a chart, a case number, not a human with a life outside the clinic. And so when the doctor tried to be friendly, someone felt the need to clarify very clearly, "Please treat me as patient file number 472. Before we wrap up, ask yourself one thing. When is being a difficult patient completely reasonable? And when does it start to feel like a bit too much? Because some complaints are genuinely necessary, but others exist simply because people don't like silence. If you laughed at least once while watching Hit Like. If you've personally witnessed a situation just like this in real life, drop a comment and share it so everyone can laugh together. And if you enjoy storytelling that's both humorous and deeply human, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because as long as people live together, as long as there are hospitals, services, and emotions, there will always be something to complain about, whether we're being taken care of or not.